Hey guys, welcome again. My name is Bahroz and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I will talk about common interview mistakes related to Amazon interviews that candidates make. The reason I have come out on this subject is because I coach numerous candidates on how to ace interview in Amazon, and I repeatedly see these mistakes being made by those candidates. So I thought it would be nice to make a video capturing those mistakes that you need to avoid altogether for you to be able to ace the Amazon interview. Now, the first mistake that I want to call out is not being prepared for the introduction altogether. People think that they would just go in an interview, the interviewer will be asking them, introduce yourself or tell me about yourself, and this is not an important question, and they may just say something out of on the fly, or just don't really need to prepare a lot about it because it's just merely an interview introduction question, and hence they won't be judged on this question. But it's very important for you to prepare well for your introduction for a couple of reasons. One is this is the first question that will be asked of you in the interview. So the first impression is very important. If you really ace this part of the question, well, you set a very important and good impression for the interviewer. Second is you also set the tone of the interview, because when you ace the first question and you come across very confident or prepared, then you set the tone of the interview. Third is that the interviewer is not actually judging you on this question, which is very much right. They're not scoring you, not judging whether you'll do a good introduction or a bad introduction. They're neutral. So if you go across and make a very strong impression, then suddenly they're surprised and they go like, wow, I wasn't expecting this. I wasn't judging you. I wasn't even trying to qualify them on this particular answer, but they did a great job. So it just will create a bigger wow factor for you. Hence, it is very important you go in prepared on how to introduce yourself. Well, I've made a separate video on how you should go about introducing yourself. I highly recommend you check out that video. You will find that video in my Amazon interview playlist. So otherwise, I'll leave the link for that video in the description of this video. So I highly recommend you check that video out because, as I said, this question is super important. And the way you handle it will really make an impression on the interviewer and will set the tone for the rest of the interview. Now here I also want to call out, which is in case you are interested in having a one-to-one coaching session with me on Amazon interview, primarily, you can book a session with me using the link that I will leave in the description of this video. In that session, I will conduct mock sessions. I will tell you how you can make your answers and your star model and your kind of examples that you have for different questions better and be able to ace the interview. In case you're wondering how does that session look like, I have a couple of videos on my channel where I have recorded sessions with candidates. You can check those videos out and that will give you a good guideline. Now let's move on to the second mistake. The second mistake is not following the STAR model. The STAR model, what it does is it gives a structure to the answer. S for situation, T for task, A for action, R for results. So when you talk in this manner, it gives the structure to your answer. So it becomes very easy for the interviewer to understand what you're saying. It becomes very easy for the interviewer to take notes. At the end of the day, your job is for the interviewer to understand what you're saying and be able to take good notes so that they can remember you later when they refer to their notes. If you don't speak in a structured format, they will be kind of lost. They will be thinking, okay, what is he trying to say? What is she trying to say? Where are they heading? Is this the answer that I'm looking for? Is this the direction they're going to? Is this the result? Is this the final outcome? Are they about to end their example? They will be all confused. However, if you go about using a STAR format, which is start with the situation, you say, this is what was happening as background. This was my task. These are the actions I took. And here was the result. Now they are in their mind already prepared to accept an answer in this format because Amazon tells or teaches their interviewer to look for the STAR format. So they are already looking for the STAR format. If you deviate from the STAR format, it would be very difficult for them to understand your answer. And hence, even if your answer is a good answer, you will lose that particular instance in the interview. The third mistake to avoid is situation being too weak. So in the STAR model, the first is situation or the issue, it being too weak. Like you just say, oh, there was an issue and I resolved the issue. Well, try to make the issue sound big, like it was really something which was really important. If it wasn't solved, it would have caused many dollars of losses, many hours of losses, big strain on the strategy, on business, profitability, something or the other. It should be critical. If it's critical, and only if you come with even the simplest way to solve something, but as long as it's something that is critical, very important, very major, then you come across as a hero. It's just like the David and the Goliath story. So David is able to kill Goliath with a slingshot. which is very simple thing to do. But since he was able to kill Goliath, hence David comes across as a hero. So you need to paint your situation as something which is very complex, which is very big, which is very important. And now you come and you even do the simplest of the actions, you sound like a hero. So even if your situation is not like very massive or very important, just make it sound important, exaggerate a bit. Now here, one request before we go into the other mistakes, that is, in case you find any value from this video, please press the like button, as this keeps me motivated. And more importantly, subscribe to the channel as well, because on this channel I post content pertaining to how you can achieve success in your career. Now let's keep rolling. So the fourth mistake to avoid is not summarizing the situation. So we talked about situation not being weak. The second is not summarizing the situation and not clearly calling out the task. The point here is, when you talk about the situation, you talk a lot of things. It was during my time in this particular company when I was in this position and this happened and that happened. So it will take you like 2 minutes, 3 minutes to explain the situation. Now you said a lot of things which you had to say just to set the background, but they are not relevant for the interviewer to take notes. The interviewer to take note, what you need to do is, after calling out everything that happened in the situation, you need to summarize. So essentially, this was the issue and I was tasked to do this. This should be done in one line each. So essentially we were losing share in the market and my job was to figure out why we were losing share and fix that. So even when you talk about, I was working in this company, we were losing share and the share loss was going to the competition and it was happening over a couple of years, blah, 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 blah. So long story, but then you make a summary. So essentially, or to summarize, we were losing share and I was tasked to figure out how do we gain back share. So it is very important for you to summarize the situation. Now, the next is not focusing on the how and only calling out the why or the what. This is particularly with regards to the actions. So we talked about the situation, but when you come to the actions, I see many candidates just calling out the actions they took. Oh, I analyzed the data. I consulted some of the experts and I did an analysis. And I came up with a few options and then I recommended an option. Well, these are the what did you do? But in each of the whats, there is a how factor as well. How did you do it? How did you do the analysis? How did you pull out the data? How did you approach the experts? How did you present the information? So how did I pull out the data? I went to the data experts. I pulled out data from one system which had the pricing data, and then I pulled out the share data and I did a cross section between the two, or I plotted the two together to see a correlation. So talk more on how did you do it. The interviewer is not interested in what did you do. This is very bookish. This is very textbook. They're interested in knowing how did you do it, because the problem that you faced previously in your job will not be repeated again. But what will be repeated again is whether you know the process of solving the problem. So there will be a very different problem that you will face in Amazon. So they want to know that whether you know the process of solving the problem, as against just saying, I analyze the data. Okay, I know you analyze the data, but how did you go about analyzing the data? I presented the information or the analysis. Well, I know you presented the information, but how did you present the information? So I went to my manager. I just put all the analysis in one page and I shared with him the graph where, for instance, there is a correlation between the share and the price, and I tried to convince him. So say more, give some story, give some context on how did you go about taking that particular action. That piece is very important. I see this happening all the time. People talk about the what, they miss talking about the how. It is very important to talk about the how. The sixth is, when they talk about the results, they don't talk about what did they learn. They will just go like saying, we saw a growth of 20% because of all the actions I took, or I was able to save 10 hours per month because of the actions I took. Okay, fine. But what did you learn? All the candidates that will be interviewing with Amazon will be just talking about these were the results. If you want to create an edge and you want to stand out, you also want to say, and this is what I learned from the particular example. So for instance, we were able to save 10 hours per month. And my key learning was that it is always important to involve the team who is in the driving seat, because they are the ones who can come up with the best of the ideas. And this is what I did in this particular example, which is I involved them, I got the ideas and tips from them, and basis their suggestions and tips, we were able to come up with the right solution. So this was my learning. So always talk about what did you learn through the entire experience. The second mistake is that you need to avoid is asking questions for the sake of asking questions, which is when the interviewer says, do you have any questions for me? You go like, yeah, I have questions. And then you ask questions for the sake of asking questions. Like you ask questions about business, you ask questions about some recent news about their PR campaign, their brand campaign and stuff like that. And you're just trying to pretend you are interested in the business. Well, you might be interested in the business, but you're more interested in getting that job. And if you're interested in getting that job, I want you to use this last segment of the interview to also sell yourself. And how you sell yourself is asking a question on which you can reflect back. Let's say, what does success look like for an individual coming in this role? And now they tell you things that they are looking for in the candidate, with some of the things that you already know, but maybe they come up with something new which they've not talked before, not asked you a question about, and you go like, well, thank you for saying that, and I want to reflect on this. And then you make an answer or share an answer on top of the answer that they've given. So make it a conversation versus just asking a question and saying, okay, a check mark. It should not be a check mark. It should be strategic for you to ask those questions. Well, I have also made a separate video exactly calling out what kind of questions you should ask and how you should go about asking those questions. So I highly recommend checking that out. It's also in the playlist of Amazon hiring that I have on my channel. So I highly recommend you check it out. Now, the last error to avoid is not focusing on recent examples. So while I always say in my videos, focus on your best example, but if your best example is like 5 years old or 8 years old, well, then that's not a great thing. You should have recent examples. So if you have a career of 10 years, let's say, try focusing on last 5 years. Or even if you have a career of 5 years, just try focusing on last 5 years. Last 5 years are critical. So if you have a career of 5 years, well, then you focus on your entire career. If you have a career of, let's say, 8 years, I want you to focus on the last 5 years and ignore the earlier 3 years. So find best example, good examples from last 5 years. Don't go too back in your career because that is less relevant now. That was good enough for you to step up to where you are now or where you were during past 5 years, but that's it. So make sure you focus more on the recent examples versus just trying to pick up a best example which is more than 5 years old. That is not best of the strategies. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. Hopefully after watching this video, you have a good idea of what mistakes to avoid when going in an Amazon interview. Hopefully this will help you ace the interview as it has done with many candidates that I've coached. And again, best of luck. Thank you.